Hello, welcome to Everyday Experts Special Author Spotlight. I have searched high and low in the catacombs, and I have rediscovered Mr. Marc Davis is back. We were talking about one of the Joker LMHC Presents episodes, and he mentioned, "Oh, I have a book coming out." Well, I am a logophile at heart and a lover of the word, and I was very surprised to learn Mr. Davis is actually finished his book, and it's available. The link is in the chat. Also, the link for Alchemy Counseling is in the chat. He wrote this book, very nice dedication. It's a ebook. We discussed him talking about making a paperback and all the other plans, and I'm sure he'll explain it better than me because he's the paragon of excellence and knowledge when it comes to all things suicide and self-harm. He will be on Joker LMHC Presents, and when we discuss suicidality. Other than that, coming to the motherfucking stage, Mr. Marc Davis, LMHC.
Hey, thanks for having me again. I love to be here.
Oh, thank you, sir. All right, so this is the author spotlight. What I really want to do is just kind of dig into the trenches of how you came about wanting to create the book. So the first thing I like to talk about is, how did you come up with the idea, and where did this, kind of baby come from?
Sure, yeah. So something I learned through, even starting in grad school, was that there's a lot of therapists and then even clinicians in general who their knowledge of crisis intervention and specifically suicide intervention, it leaves a lot to be lacking. There's a lot of clinicians I know of, I even read about on Reddit and the Facebook groups, and even just talking to people in person, that they're afraid to work with suicide, and oftentimes for good reason. They're afraid they're going to put the idea in their head. They're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing, and the patient's going to kill themselves, or maybe even if they do kill themselves, oh my God, I'm going to get sued and lose my license. Very normal fears. So that's where this came from. I specialize in it. I'm one of the few clinicians in New York who specializes in suicide. And so I wanted to help others. And my big overarching goal was to make at least even a tiny dent in the mental health epidemic that we're seeing in this country.
I know that, for me personally, and I work with some clients that are, suicidal, self-harming. How do you feel, and you have some interesting stats that we'll go into, how do you feel the numbers kind of compare up to when you actually wrote the book? Like first started putting it together?
Has it changed over the years to today?
Yeah.
So the numbers that I put in the book are from 2020 to 2021. So obviously 2020 was, the pandemic, leading to 2021, where we really went to like the height of it, to starting to come off of it, to then 2022, 2023 really, went to its tail end. But those numbers definitely, I would say, I think obviously went up because of the pandemic and all the stress and the changes that were happening all over the world. Forget this country, all over the world. They don't really reflect too much what was happening before those years because of the pandemic. However, even before, those numbers were ridiculously high. And obviously, as we're looking into the numbers every single year, they are starting to come down a little bit because the pandemic has ended a bit, but the numbers are still way too high. They're still in the hundreds of thousands. They're still in the millions, still in the tens of millions. We want to try to break that as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, it's a lot. I know we talked about your training with the crisis line and all of those things. We went into depth about that when you had your interview. What do you think is besides the obvious, the scariest for a clinician to deal with when it comes to suicide?
I think, like I said, I think that the two scariest things are there's legality, you know, losing your
Mm-hmm.
license, uh, potentiality for maybe even criminal litigation, like, medical negligence, that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And also losing your patient. Aside from the horrible feeling that brings, on top of that, it even brings, the worst imposter syndrome you'd ever feel. Like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
I can't save people. I got into this to help people, and I just had someone die on me. Do I belong here? Am I actually helping people? What am
Mm-hmm.
I doing? So it's a bunch of those kinds of things that could really make someone scared to even go in those waters. Because why take that risk?
Mm-hmm. So how come you wrote the book just for clinicians? How come you said, you know what? I think clinicians should have a tool, and it's good because tools are always important, and
Mhm.
people don't understand that you need a way to implement things that's tangible for people to walk away with from session.
Yeah, that's a
What?
great question. No, it's a phenomenal question, honestly. So the reason I focus it for clinicians is because whenever we're learning new things to help, whether it's medically, whether it's in terms of therapy, it can even,
Mm-hmm.
it can even be, dental. Obviously the first person or people that we go to are the clinicians, the dentists, the doctors, the therapists, the nurses.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones who have the training, so they require the least amount of foundational knowledge because they should already have that foundation. So this was
Mm-hmm.
meant for them because they already have a basic medical interventional mindset and foundational knowledge of the issues that go on in psychological, medical. So I wanted to be able to supplement that with what they're missing, those gaps, either the knowledge or the confidence. When it comes to lay people, the general populace, they would require for interventions a lot more of that foundation. And I think that when it comes to interventions, that's
Mm-hmm.
more the professionals. When it comes to lay people, that's much more teaching prevention. And that has already been, done extensively ad nauseum. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many resources out there. You can Google,
Mm-hmm.
how to prevent suicide or what things you can do, the warning
Yeah.
signs. You can't really Google, hey, when you're in session or when you have a patient in the room and you go in and they're talking about wanting to kill themselves, what do you do when they're in your care?
Yeah.
It's not really as pervasive, that information.
No, and it takes a special skill set because one, you have to almost stymie your fear and your
Yes.
you said in the book at one point that if the person who's suicidal is scared, well, you're scared. If you're scared, then the person who's suicidal is scared as well.
Yeah, they're terrified.
How did you kind of come to that sentiment or thought?
Because I mean, I even put the kind of example in the book itself, and because I think it really is a great analogy that if you're going for surgery
Mm-hmm.
and you can tell your surgeon is nervous or scared about performing this surgery on you,
Yep.
you're the patient. How do you feel? You're probably terrified. Like, oh my god, they're not confident that they can help me. I, do I want this person helping me? Can this person help me? So the same thing for this. If you're with a clinician, a therapist, and the therapist seems too scared to work with you, then you're like, oh my God, this person, maybe my last ray of hope that I came to for help is too scared to help me. They're not competent enough. I really am hopeless. No one can help me. So now I'm terrified that I'm never going to get help. And they may even lead them even more so to want to actually take action because they feel, well, it actually really is hopeless. And this therapist just, or this nurse, this doctor just, confirmed it to me.
What do you think?
Right?
What do you think is the hardest part for you to convey to somebody that you're teaching how to intervene? A therapist, a professional. What do you think is the hardest part? The hardest thing for them to kind of grasp? Because I know you used to do trainings for the crisis hotline too, right?
Yeah, I did that as well. Yeah.
What do you think was the hardest thing for you to say? Okay, let me take this knowledge out of my brain and put it into yours.
Um, in terms of hardest, so I guess one of the hardest things for people to learn, one of the hardest facts is that talking about it does not make them think about it. No one goes through life
Mm.
where things are going wrong. They have all these L's, right? And then someone says, "Are you thinking of killing yourself?" And they go, "You know what? I never thought of that, but that's a really good idea." It doesn't happen. So
Mm.
so if you bring it up, it either they'll feel validated because, oh my God, yes, someone's finally willing to talk to me about it and not be scared. Or
Mm-hmm.
they might not have been thinking about it and be like, no, I never thought about that. And no, I would not do that. No one has that first reaction that I gave. That's, I think, one of the most common things for people to like the factoids to learn. In terms of skills to learn, I
Mm-hmm.
think this is more of a personality thing. Where in the book, I even say, like, listen, use humor, it could help. Obviously, use it conservatively, use it
Mm-hmm.
only if it's meant to help the patient. And I think in most scenarios where we're taught to use humor to kind of build that rapport,
Right.
that's a very hard thing to teach. Another very hard thing to teach is we want to reduce access to means, lethal means, a gun, a knife, a belt, rope. And if the patient is unwilling to do that, sometimes you got to be a little stronger, a little more heavy-handed with them. So, for example, something that I will do is I'll be like, listen, we're talking life and death here. This is not a game. So I want to make sure that you're safe. I can't do that if we can't reduce the access to the means. So we have a few choices. You can work with me and
Mm-hmm.
we reduce access. You don't reduce access and you don't work with me, I could refer you out, that's fine. Or we
Right.
can go a higher level of care. Your choice. Because I'm gonna be real with you. This is what's needed in order to help you. And I know you want to, and if you really do want to, work with me.
Mm.
And that kind of very straight talk of almost people might even say cold and calculating. People might
Mm-hmm.
say that. It's controversial, it's effective, but it's controversial, and sometimes people don't always feel comfortable with that. It might be hard for them to internalize. Therapists, nurses, physicians.
Do you think that it is? I don't want to say wrong. Do you think it's a struggle for therapists to kind of be more like that assertive, challenge the person where they're at? Because you kind of need to challenge their idea that suicide is the way out.
Right. I think many clinicians don't have a problem with confronting specifically suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might have difficulty confronting in general outside of that. Because a big piece of working with suicide, I mean, the most effective means of therapy for suicide is CBT and its offshoots, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of those have to do with confronting. Even if it's DBT, even if it's ACT, it doesn't have to be CBT or RBT.
Right.
Those still require some kind of listen. The way you're going about this isn't helping you. I'm showing you what can help you. Try doing this instead.
Mm-hmm.
And it requires a little bit of confrontation with that. And some people are maybe not feel as comfortable doing that, especially if they're like, oh my God, if I'm too heavy handed, they're gonna, walk out that door, never come back, and myself and nobody else is ever gonna see them again.
Right.
So there could be a piece of that, yeah.
Mm. So, kind of moving into the actual book,
Hmm.
the alchemy approach. You spent a lot of time explaining in the book why you chose the term alchemy. So I want to give
Yeah.
you the chance to explain, you know, the title and how
Hmm.
you came up with like the whole idea of alchemy. I mean, we've talked about this before, but go ahead.
Right. I mean, it's pretty much the same thing as how I named my practice alchemy counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, much how ancient practitioners tried to literally make lead into gold. We kind of do that in therapy and even in medicine. We take the lead of whether it's depression or whether it's I don't know cancer, diabetes, diverticulitis, whatever it is, and try to heal them, make them better. Turn them into gold. That's general therapy. As it pertains to this book, why I called it the alchemy approach, why I named the book that.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it came more than just my own clinical experiences. I took a bunch of different things. I took
Mm-hmm.
the research, all the literature, which oh my God, the amount of books and papers I had to read to get all that information. I think it was like 10 pages in that bibliography. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it was a lot. So I took all of that. I took the training that I went through with the American Association of Suicidology, training I went through with CAMS, the Collaborative Assessment Methods for Means Against Suicidality, um, as well as, again, my own clinical experience with the
Right.
suicide hotline, being a therapist. And I took all these elements together and made a new element, which is the alchemy approach, to make them better and more than just the sum of their parts.
Mm. Was it hard to take these different parts and meld them down into one? See the alchemy illusion. Meld them into one.
um, a little bit, not really, a little bit, because a lot of because again, the American Association, CAMS, a lot of them share a lot of the same research that I was using. So there was a lot of overlap. And
Okay.
also, again, from the Crisis Center, they've been around for a long time. So they have a lot of trial and error. Obviously, they also use the research. So there really wasn't that much stepping on toes. There was a thing here and there like, okay, which technique might be better to use? And okay, this actually might go completely against this one and completely contradict. Which one do I think, in my experience, and my knowledge and research, is actually better? And okay, so we'll pick that one instead. But that was rare. But yeah, it wasn't that hard to bring them all together.
Did you find that? Did you find that it was
This is gonna be a
hard
good question.
because
You're
I know,
thinking about it.
huh?
I said this is gonna be a good question. You're thinking about it.
Well, I want to word it right. Did you find that because the book reading it's like a tool. It does have some. It has a case study, or it has tools
Mhm.
and techniques in it, which is great. Do you find it hard to leave out kind of your personal experiences because you have years, like a dearth of knowledge about suicidality? You probably could have told story after story after story. Do you think that that would have lost something, or do you think that you did that, left that out on purpose?
Ooh, I was right. It was a good question. Um, so there is a bit of me in there and a bit of my experience in there, and I think you
Okay.
could really find that in the case study. Obviously, can't go and I can't recreate something, so I had to
Right.
make most of it up. But
Mm-hmm.
like the skeleton of it is from a case I had, and actually all the dialogues of treatment, all the examples of the skills being put into practice are from cases that I've had. Again, I pretty much changed them almost entirely, but the skeletons of them are the same because again, trying to avoid HIPAA, you want to make sure
Mm-hmm.
confidentiality is respected. But yeah, I mean, I didn't just come up with these out of the ether. These are things that I've seen, I've heard, and that I've dealt with.
Mm. All right, so let's dig into it, into the nitty
Yeah.
gritty nuts and bolts. The book is dedicated to Marion David Kessler.
Miriam,
Davis
yeah.
Kessler. Who's that?
Miriam was my sister that unfortunately she passed away from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Uh, she was my oldest
Mm-hmm.
sister. She was a social worker herself, so she also went into the mental health field. And even though she wasn't really a practitioner, she wasn't a clinician, she was really wise. Like, let me tell you, the stories I could tell you about this woman. But to keep it short and sweet and simple, um, from her years, her experience, her wisdom, I learned a lot. It actually informed a lot of my practice, not specifically with suicide, but just in general as a
Mm-hmm.
clinician. And I used so many of the things she taught me in my sessions with my clients, and it was like, holy shit, that actually worked way better than if I just went with what I wanted to go with. Wow, thank you, Miriam. So that's why, um, actually, those are the reasons why I felt it was appropriate to dedicate my first book to her.
It wasn't suicide, right? But you
No,
said
no, 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 no.
no. You said you taught me so many lessons, even when battling pancreatic cancer, that I still use daily in both my personal and professional lives. And I
Yes.
believe from us far, you were taken away from us far, far too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not one of the things that I know when I drive home? Listen, I know you think suicide's the way. I know you think this is the only thing you can do about it. But you're not solving anything. You're just gone.
Um, so yes and no. So when you
Okay.
say you're not solving anything, it depends on what the problem is.
Yeah.
So if the problem, which generally speaking, the problem is I'm dealing with a lot of emotional pain,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking. And I tell people, I'm honest with them. I'm like, listen, and this is actually one of my Hail Mary approaches when
Mm-hmm.
nothing else is working. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
listen, suicide is an option. It's on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Let's call a spade a spade. It will get rid of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
But we have other options on the table too.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about suicide is it's the only option that flips that table and everything else flies out the window.
Yep.
So, how about this? Let's try some of these other options. And even if we do 2, 5, 10 of them, if none of them work, suicide's still not on that table. It's not going anywhere. And generally, again, when you have that hellbent patient, the one who's like gonna do it, nothing else is working, that usually gets them to say, okay, fine. Because in a way, you're validating their feelings, their drives, you're validating all that, but you're not giving into it. And they try those things, and it has not yet happened to me that none of those things on that table help them. It might have happened the first or fifth, but usually by like 10, one of those helps them.
I like that approach. I did use some of your techniques a little bit. When I have, I think now the amount of anxiety and depression that we get in general is just insane.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of teens, and it's a lot of 9, 10, 11, 12, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah.
And they're learning about all of these different, because there's just so much information available to kids.
Social media doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. Social media doesn't help. TikTok, where you have people who are, pseudo experts, and then you have, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. All of these things is information about. I have one client who I got 2 years ago out of the hospital who I don't think she was suicidal, but she talked to one of her friends and she told her about cutting, and she told her about how she could, you're teaching these, coping skills that are destructive, because they're not going to adults. They're not going to counselors, and they're going to the other 12-year-olds, and they're going to TikTok, and they're going to Facebook and Instagram and all of these things where you're like, well, this is hard. So my question is kind of more so, what is it that you think is the biggest thing, and I'll say this for a clinician, I'll ask, what do you think is the biggest thing that you have to deal with as a clinician when it comes to suicide?
The biggest thing. I mean, first off, that whole rant about social media, totally agree. Every word of it. On point. The biggest thing that I deal with when it comes to suicide for my patients, honestly, I think it's honestly it's them feeling like no one understands, or no one's willing to talk about it, or that they can't be about it, because if they do, then they're going to get hospitalized. Yeah. And I pretty much tell my patients in the first, in the first session, I say, listen, I'm probably not going to hospitalize you. These are the parameters. I'm not going to say it on the internet. These are the parameters by which you will get hospitalized. Barring this parameter, I'm not hospitalizing you. And I tell them up front. Now, some clinicians have told me, like, okay, so you're inviting them to lie to you. I disagree. I think I'm inviting them to be honest with me.
Trust.
Yes, I'm building trust.
And I'll just use teens, because that's the biggest amount, of people who I deal with that's suicidal. I know you deal with adults. I have a couple of adults, but not as much. I probably have more like teens. I have a lot of people that have these borderline traits that dealt with suicidality in their past. I know they want to be able to trust you. And these are people that have been in the hospital, and they've talked to therapists, and they've talked to... So these kids aren't stupid.
No, they're not.
The first time I talked to a therapist, I was like 24. I wasn't 12 going into the hospital, and you're like, but it's true. I mean, I had one girl who told me she was 12 in the hospital, and I've shared this story before, and the psychiatrist told her that she should be ashamed of what she's doing to her parents.
Jesus
fuck. Fucking tried to kill herself. Like, what do you mean? What she's doing to her parent? And this was an older guy, and generational ideas evolve. He was like 85. He probably was like 2 days from retiring or something like that. And I'm not giving him an excuse. I'm more pointing out that, one, the ideas around suicide have become more complex, but I also think that the information about suicide in general, because I'll say, And my question is, I know you deal with self-harm too. Do
Yeah,
you feel
100%.
like self-harm is just becoming more commonplace now? And suicidality, I mean, I think suicide kind of stays high, but
So I mean, first of all, I think that's like I just mentioned. You should give him my book just to fix that. Um, but I can definitely see self harm increasing, 100%. It's been
yeah.
increasing as social media becomes more and more, becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Yes, self harm will definitely increase because what you have is a bunch of teens who, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. When you are young, you are dumb, you don't have enough life experience, you don't have what to compare it to.
Right.
All you know is school. You don't know the real world. This isn't to speak bad against them. We were all there. I was
Yeah.
a fucking idiot as a 13-year-old. I can't speak
Yeah.
for you, but I was a fucking idiot.
I'm still an idiot.
I disagree. But the point I'm getting at is that they don't know not to compare their behind the scenes to everybody else's highlight reel.
Mm, that's good. I like that. Compare. I'm taking notes. I'm stealing your shit.
Yeah, shoot, go for it.
Um,
And so, and that creates a lot of self harm. And that's like even one reason. There's tons of reasons
hmm
why. So like again, let's go back to social media.
yeah.
Um, so people self harm for a litany of reasons. One of them could be punishment. So as
hmm
an example, something some individuals might find, especially with teenage girls, is especially with um, societal standards of beauty. So
hmm
let's say for example, there's a teenage girl who her breasts aren't the way that she wants them to be. They're too small, let's say.
hmm
And so what you might find is that she'll self harm her breasts. She might burn them or cut them as a means of punishment. You might
mm
find some individuals, and this could be a teenager, it could be an adult, doesn't matter. More so with teenagers because they have less control in their lives, where I have no control. My parents are abusive. I can't leave. All this stuff. I have no control. You know what I do have control over? I have control of this knife to my wrist.
Yep. Yep. I have one girl who, um, her word is bored. I'm bored. I don't know what to do. I don't have friends. Well, she has friends. Her best friends kind of disappeared because she met the person in the hospital.
Hmm.
Suicide attempts, suicidal plans. Doesn't hasn't. I've been working with her for 6 months, but she's one of those people where she's pretty honest, which I'm lucky. She's honest when she's feeling away. So I asked her. I said, "Oh, hey," talking to her like 2 weeks ago. What's going
Hmm.
on? She said, I'm feeling like I want to self harm. I have this old razor and blah 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 blah
Mm.
blah. Oh, people are like, oh, my initial thought was she was like, yeah, but I really don't want to get rid of it. So she's trying to preempt my questions. I'm like, okay, the razor can be there as long as you're not going to use the razor.
Right.
And
I
I know
agree.
your initial thought is not yours, but initial thought is for somebody is, well, why would you even want to do that? Well, I'm not with her physically. I'm on telehealth.
Mm. Mm.
Do I trigger her and say, "Oh no, you got to get rid of that razor. I'm gonna call your mom. We're gonna." Blah, blah. She said,
No. No.
and she said, my mom. If you tell my mom, she's gonna, go inpatient because my mom worries. And again, serious cutter, like box cutter and all this stuff when she cuts and all this, like hardcore.
Yeah.
And I think what I learned from somebody, this was years ago, who was a self harmer. The
Hmm.
thing I learned was that when she said, sometimes I just like to watch the blood.
Mm.
Sometimes I just like to look at it because the release is a release for me.
Okay.
And this is I was like, oh
Makes
wow,
perfect sense to me.
yeah. And getting into this world now because a lot of, and you see it, a lot of these, they're just complex. There's so much comorbidity between everything.
Yeah, which is why. So when I was originally, again, working at the crisis center, and we had these self-harming cases, we had them over the phone. So much like how you're saying, oh, it's over the computer, they can
Yeah,
hang up on me at any point, completely in their
no,
control. So I obviously don't tell them, oh, don't do that. Oh, where's your
yeah,
mom? No, the better question that I was taught to ask, and it actually really works, is okay. So when you self harm, what is the goal?
Mm.
Is it control? Is it punishment? Is it physical pain is easier than emotional pain? What is the
Mm.
goal?
I believe she
So
told me more along the lines of I don't think it was punishment, and I don't think it was really like this. Maybe control, like I would say somewhere along the lines of control and like in the field of the release.
right, exactly. Feel that release. I have so much, you know, I feel like it's pent up in me.
Uh huh.
Watching that blood run, I'm picturing my emotions, that tension running out of me.
Mm. Mm.
Again, that I know it's very metaphorical, but I don't know. Maybe she's your patient. I don't know. Maybe that's what she was saying. I don't know. But my immediate next question, obviously, then is okay. I usually and usually I build a rapport by saying I have a dumb question, and I
Yeah.
usually brings down the guard a little bit. What would you say if there was a way to do that that didn't require you to hurt yourself? What would you say to that?
Mm. Mm.
And 9 times out of 10, they said like, "I'm listening," and then we
Mm-hmm.
start talking about coping skills.
Okay.
Yeah. And the hard thing about coping skills, like the worst part to me, is that there's so many and it's nothing but trial and error.
Yeah.
And part of it is you got to pray about the patient's patience in
Mm.
going through the coping skills until they find the one or two or five that help them, that work for them, actually.
Mm-hmm. And and what you hear is, and this is why I don't I don't like when people have been therapized down their throat because
Hmm.
they've heard all, oh, you gotta try coping skills and counting and breathing, and they're not bad. But what people typically do is they hear that and they shut you off because they've heard it so much. Because if you have somebody who's a real like who's been self-harming or suicidal for a long time, they're they've done that already, been there, done that,
Mm.
and they don't. A lot of times, what I said, but it's something where you need more than one, and you're gonna have to do them a bunch of times.
Yeah, there's definite truth to that. And sometimes we got, and again, I tell them, like, listen, it's trial and error.
Yep.
It might be. I tell them, like, listen, I've had people who there was as quote unquote silly as just writing with a red marker across their wrist, to simulate the
Mm.
blood, but actually fine. Some of them was holding ice in their hands. That's painful, but they're not damaging themselves. So there's so many different things you can do. You can punch a pillow, scream into the pillow. For some, this seems rather silly and kind of stupid. For others,
Hmm.
this actually works. So like I said, it's about that trial and error and what they're open to.
So, do you think, and this is going to be a controversial question, it's a hard question. If you think it's a dumb
Ooh.
question, tell me. Do you think it's for some people that are heavily suicidal to have a failure is almost something that you can build upon? A failed
A failed
suicide
suicide attempt?
attempt. Do you think that's something that you can build upon for the positive? Because I've done that with one of my clients, but I'll let you answer first.
Well, the very fact that you say you've done that tells me yes. But yeah, of course. There are definite ways of building upon it. I mean, first off, every clinician should know that even one suicide attempt already puts them at a higher lethality than not, because
Mm-hmm.
it increases exponentially their chances of trying again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, of course, because I mean, they didn't die. So you can build on them not dying or still being here. We still have a chance to work together.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course you can build on it. But I'm actually very curious. I want to know how you built upon it.
So I had a girl. I have a girl. She's 22, 23. She's a
Hmm.
baby. And I'm not one to say if she's young, right?
Hmm.
Breakup, school's overwhelming, family's crazy, all this stuff. Decided that she
Sure.
wanted to kill herself. Decided that she was going to step in front of a truck.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So, and I look at that as, oh, I'm like, oh, he was dead ass. He was serious about it.
Yeah.
The truck stopped in time. And I asked, oh, how did you feel? She's like, I felt fucking good. She was like, I realized I'm not ready to die.
Yeah.
And that's where we've built the conversation from, you know.
A million percent.
And I told her, I said, listen, and I asked her, I'm like, you feeling suicidal? No, all this stuff and blah blah blah. And she's got some other little hangups, but I'm just like, okay, I'm glad you're happy. I'm glad you're smiling. I'm glad, you know, you pick up the phone when I call for session. I'm glad you talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can text you and be like, oh, hey, do you want to meet this time? Well, I'm going to school. I'm about to graduate. I'm glad. That's where I built that from. I'm like, you wouldn't have been able to do any of this if you didn't get that chance. And
Right.
you are so, and I try to tell people, I'm like, you're so important to the world, and you just don't realize it because you think you're just a number.
They don't realize it,
Right.
and they can't in that state of thought. You know, it's so
Mm-hmm.
interesting what you said about that story. You know, it kind of reminds me. Have you seen the documentary about the Golden Gate Bridge?
That's the guy who was on the bus, right?
Well,
I,
he
I
went to the bridge.
on the way to the bridge, right? So
He went to the bridge and he jumped off.
yeah,
And
no,
yeah. Oh, so you did see it? Yeah.
I didn't see the documentary. I've read the article. I'm old. I read the article, and what I remember from the article, and I tell a lot of my clients, and you can
Mhm.
about the actual jumping, but I tell a story from him saying that I was on the bus. I wrote it from the beginning of the line to the end, and if one person would have asked me if I was okay, what's going on, he said I was crying. I looked like crap. If one person would have asked me, you know, what's going on? He said, I probably wouldn't have done it. Is he the one that jumped and broke like every bone in his body?
Yes. And while he was falling, he realized, oh, no, I don't want to
Yeah.
die.
Yep. Yep.
So, and that's the thing. And that's the thing. Suicidal people don't want to die. They want
No.
an end to the pain.
Mm-hmm.
That's all
Mm-hmm.
it is. And
They,
that's
they,
the thing.
they want to be able to
Basically,
see.
no one wants to die.
No. What? I tell people all the time, people ever said, and I used to say this in jest, but in truth, people be like, oh, you know, have you ever did it? I said, no, I love myself too much. And I'm not being a dick, but if you
Yeah.
can't love yourself enough to say, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. It's been bad. I'm sure you've
Yeah.
like everybody's bottom is their
Oh, yeah.
bottom,
Oh, yeah.
but that never entered my mind at all because, you know, now at this point, being an old man, there's my wife and my kids, and you know, my God, there's so many people that I just think when stuff happens, like you see crying faces,
Oh, yeah.
and I think that
Oh, yes.
reality check for me being older is like, oh yeah, I can't, I couldn't,
But that's a part of it. A
yeah,
large part of what helps to mitigate suicide is a feeling of purpose or meaning.
yeah,
And so if you have a wife and kids, that can definitely be it.
yeah, yeah. That's crazy. I mean, and we're gonna go more into this on when we go into actual suicidality and stuff like that. Um,
Mhm.
into your book a little bit more. Let's hit these stats a little bit. And these
Yeah.
numbers are from 2021, so I'm sure they're
Hmm.
probably just as insane as they are to read. Over 48,000 people died in 2021 by suicide.
Yep.
This is the one that punched me in the face. One death every 11 minutes.
Yeah.
Every 11 minutes.
Yeah. Because there were 1.7 million attempts,
Yep.
3.5 million made a plan, 12.3
Yep.
million, seriously thought about it.
Yep.
And if you have like 48,000 people who actually did it, if you then do the math, it comes out to roughly one every 11 minutes.
Yeah. And it's just like, wow. And, you know, I think now as I'm into what I do like about social media is that more people and where we are now, because 5 years ago, mental health and therapy wasn't like this. And I mean, I don't know if it's
Right.
since the pandemic, it's like, wow. What I do like is people are being honest about how they're feeling. They're telling you I'm
Yeah.
depressed. There are people seeking therapy and, you know, seeing more Black people in therapy, seeing more Irish people in therapy,
Mm-hmm.
seeing more couples, seeing more Spanish people, seeing more
Yeah.
men
Yeah.
initiating. And am I lying? Am I making it up? Is these people that
You're
you,
not. Almost my entire practice is men.
and it's like, wow, seeing more people come into therapy. And, you know, I think that that is one of the good things about the talk about how you feel
Yeah,
movement.
100%. Being able to, not have to hold it all up in there and be able to let it out.
Mm.
Because, I mean, just medically speaking, we're helping people live longer. Forget even just, with
Yeah.
the interventions we use, just
Yep.
by releasing that tension, that stress, we're saving them from death. Just helping them live just a few more years.
Mm-hmm. 36% increase in suicide.
Mm-hmm.
36%. So
Yeah,
that tells me that more than a quarter of the people in this, and I don't know if this is the United States or the world. I'm assuming it's the United States,
it's the U.S.
but it's the U.S. So if you had 48,000 people in 2021, that's only the U.S.
That's only the U.S.
And people don't understand that, if there's 7 billion, what's 50,000 of 7 billion? So then you multiply that by and that's probably the world number of reported.
Right. No,
Of
exactly.
reported.
Just what we know. Exactly.
Yes.
And same thing in America. Again, this number is just what we know. There were those
Yeah.
that we had no idea.
Good. I like that. The likelihood of fatality increases exponentially.
Yeah,
You
that
spoke
was
about it a little bit, but how did
a
that
crazy thing to learn.
how did that affect you being somebody who's worked with suicide and it's your specialty?
I went, oh fuck. That was my immediate reaction. Because because you would think, okay, they're more likely, okay, maybe a little bit,
Yep.
no, it's not like, 5, 10, 15. It goes up by exponents. It goes to the second power, the third power, the fourth power. It goes up by a lot. It's crazy. The more attempts you have, the way more likely you are to try again. And the more attempts you have, the more failed attempts you have, the more likely you are to be successful.
The four core principles, tell me about those.
Yeah, so those are the basic things that you need to know about suicide, where it comes from, how to utilize them in order to do a lethality assessment. So you have desire, you have capability, you have intent, and you have the buffers. So desire by itself is just like, well, your desire, your want to either kill yourself or to die. And some people might just be like, listen, if I got hit by a truck tomorrow, that's fine. So we call that passive suicidality, but it's still in a way a desire to die if you're totally fine with it. Capability then goes into, how pretty much how likely are you to do that? Your actual ability to make that attempt. You can kind of things like think of like mens rea, method, means, and motive.
Mm.
That kind of goes into your capability of killing yourself. Next, you have intent. How intentful are you actually to do that? So you might have someone who's like, listen, I want to die, and I definitely have the means to do that,
Mm.
but I'm not intent on doing it. Maybe not right now. Maybe
Mm.
in 5 years. Maybe you know what? No, I'd be fine if I get hit by a truck. Yes, there's trucks outside. I can walk right in front of them, but I have no
Mm-hmm.
desire. But I have no inclination, no desire to use that word to do it right now. And then finally, there's the buffers, and this might be what stops someone from having intent. What's going on in their life? Maybe they have a wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they have goals that they want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, you know what, if I kill myself, there's nobody to feed my goldfish.
Mm. And those little things, you think they don't matter, but they do, because it only takes one reason. And this is, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking for the one reason why you don't want to kill yourself.
That's all you need. You
Only the
lean into
one
that
reason.
hope. You
Uh-huh.
latch onto that motherfucker.
Like, no.
Yeah. You lean into
um,
the hope.
I have a question for you about intent.
Yeah,
I
go
had
for it.
well, not a friend, a client, or my friend's neighbor
Hmm.
allegedly decided he wanted to commit suicide.
Okay.
Men typically use more lethal methods. He got a
True.
shotgun. He shot himself in the
Mm.
stomach.
Mm.
He
Did he die?
did not die.
Okay,
He
good.
put himself through a whole lot of pain.
Oh,
My
yeah.
question for you is, somebody like that, do you think they were hesitant, or do you think it was a call for attention, a cry for help?
Honestly, without any additional information, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Honestly, another option to add to the list is it could literally have been ignorance. oh, I didn't know that a shot to the stomach wouldn't be lethal enough. So it could be a number of things. I feel like with that particular case, I don't have enough information.
Okay.
If you want to talk like generally when people do things of that nature, it actually does fall into things you said. It's either a cry for help,
Mm,
or it's to me it's either a cry for help, or they just don't really want to do it, but I don't
mm,
know, they feel compelled to. They feel like I have no other options.
mm,
And so I'm going to choose, obviously, for a man, very lethal mean, but like I'm not really thinking about. I'm not doing. Oh yeah, my head. It's the easiest way. No, I'm just going to do it in my stomach because, why not? I'll
mm,
die, right? I'll die, right?
mm. That's like jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and just being like, "Oh yeah, this shit sucks." Oh no,
Yeah.
this is
But with
not
a,
what
but with a gunshot to the wound, I mean, between pulling the trigger and
no,
the death, you don't have much time to really think about. Oh, I don't really want to do this.
no, no. I was watching House yesterday, and this is a question I have specifically for you in dealing with suicide versus the other things you deal with.
Mm-hmm.
House was working on another doctor who was like one of those goodwill doctors that goes to different countries. He was working on TB cases in Africa with
I
children.
know. I know what you're talking about.
You know what episode I'm talking about? And he said something. The other doctor said something to the effect of House that, I think what scares you is that I know that I'm going to deal with tens of thousands of people with tuberculosis, and the numbers aren't going to be in my favor. So when you think about how you deal with suicidality and how help clinicians deal with it, does it ever scare you that you're never going to get to zero? That there's always going to
No,
be somebody
no,
attempting or.
nope, nope. And I'll tell you why. Two reasons. One, as I said, the hope with the book is
Mm-hmm,
to make even a tiny dent by
mm-hmm,
helping more clinicians become more um, confident and able, making a tiny dent.
mm-hmm,
Second is, I guess, to use my own metaphor, um, there's a story I once heard someone say. They're walking along the beach, right?
mm-hmm,
And the beach is strewn with starfish. And the guy starts just picking up starfish and throwing them into the ocean.
mm-hmm,
And someone comes along and says, "What are you doing? Come on. Look at all the starfish here. You can't possibly get all of them. What difference are you going to make?"
mm-hmm,
So he picks one up, throws it into the ocean, and says, "It mattered for that one."
mm-hmm,
And that's my mindset.
mm-hmm.
You're right. I can't help everyone. But the people that I did help,
Mm-hmm.
mattered to them.
Did your I know your sister started you kind of into the practice. Does your experience with your sister inform how you deal with the suicidality? I know it's not
Ooh,
exactly the same, but I know it's similar.
it's death and I guess kind of like imminentness of it. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's a word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes and no. So generally no, but like when you have patients who are terminally ill
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to die, again, it's also one of the dialogues of treatment. I've worked with them in the past also. They're gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we're just like, okay, let's keep you alive because I'm sure you have things you want to achieve or whatever. It gave me a new perspective, a new
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I guess, and with that perspective came empathy, more empathy than I had before. Obviously, not that I wasn't empathetic before, but that
Mm-hmm.
the more knowledge you have, the more empathetic you can be, and I really see it through their eyes
Mm-hmm.
and I experience, and not just that, not just the patient, but their family members. Because I
Mm-hmm.
was a family member, and so I see, what it's like for them. And while and part of like they don't know that this person's thinking of killing themselves. I'm sure maybe part of them, someone has that thought that it makes sense they would have that thought.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
So it really did inform me to, well, one, again, to have that empathy, but also my sister didn't give up. She fought till the end. And I once had a brief conversation with her about, like, I was driving her to her chemo.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, listen, I've had patients in the past who had cancer, yada, yada, stuff. And obviously, you're not going to kill yourself. We've had that. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that resilience, that strength come from? And, Natasha, My fiance.
Oh, hey,
Hello.
girl. How you doing?
um, so yeah, so the strength she had, it's resilience. It's it's gonna happen. Why end it? And there's always hope. Listen, stage 4, yeah, but you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Miracles happen.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy shit happens. Why make it happen faster? Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I
Welcome.
didn't know. I didn't know I could do that. That was really cool. Hearts on my screen. That's awesome. Love you, babe. But yeah, so that informed me a little bit too. Like, okay, let's really focus on those strengths,
mm,
on those W's and the hope.
mm. I've had one client who, do I think he thought that he was trying to kill himself? Maybe. He tried to overdose on pills. People don't, and I'm not being a dick, most of the time people don't understand that you'll throw up. Your body will reject a lot of that stuff for the most part when you're talking about like medication, like Lexapro and all that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
had my ex-wife who was also a therapist, had a client who tried to kill herself and
Mm.
she quit. She stopped doing therapy.
Yeah,
How do
I get
you,
that.
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really hard to keep going when you feel like you let somebody down. How do you deal with that? I don't know if you've had any people that have actually been successful.
So I'm going to be perfectly honest. It's kind of vulnerable.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes me more credible or less credible that I've never had a patient attempt. I can make an argument both ways. I think
Right.
it makes me more credible
Right.
because, I've actually been able to help everyone that's ever come to me, and I deal with it all the fucking time. Um, and not just that, I've never had to hospitalize a patient involuntarily. I've only
Right.
ever hospitalized one person, and they asked me to.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that speaks to my credit, my
Mm-hmm.
ability. But
Yeah.
that's me being a narcissistic asshole. Um,
That's you
so,
being a
but
truthful therapist.
I appreciate that. Got to support one another. But yeah, but to answer your question, so the way to deal with it, it's not easy. Oh, it's tough,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually again, I have a section that's frequently asked questions, and I think that might actually be the last question
Mm.
in that section. And I guess to just paraphrase it, there's nothing anyone can say. There are no
Yep.
magic words.
Nope.
That being said,
Oh.
there are things that can be done to help.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, get your own therapy,
Mm-hmm.
talk to supervisors, talk to other clinicians,
Mm-hmm.
and above all else, much like our patients, you know the answer. You're a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a patient who was telling you what you're going through, like how would you tell them to manage it? What
Mm-hmm.
would be your suggestion, recommendation, or advice? And then why, if it's good enough for them, why is it not good enough for you?
Yep. That's so true. Um, your hardest case, maybe the one that touched closest to home, maybe the one that punched you in the gut. Um, was that person in mind when you wrote this book or put it
Of
together?
course, 1,000,000%. Yeah, it was a very hard case. Oh boy, was that a hard case. It actually, again, it's in one of the dialogues of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
A person, like, again, it's not exactly one to one, but the skeleton. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was a teenage girl. She was
Mm-hmm.
definitely in my mind. There was another kid. He was 12 and he wanted to
Mm-hmm.
kill himself. And I eventually had to refer him out, mainly because his parents weren't being helpful. They were
Mm.
actually being very antagonistic and making it more difficult for me to help him. So I actually had to activate the mobile crisis unit.
Mm.
And from there, they had to refer him to a higher level of care.
I mean, you got to do what you got to do, and it's hard. And people don't understand the fractions of inches between I helped this person to I didn't do enough to, and it all goes through your head all the time. You
Oh,
know.
yeah, 100%. Oh, and this kind of came to my mind, now that we're talking about, extreme cases and,
Yeah.
extreme measures. Um, if there are any psychiatrists or nurse practitioners or any other prescribers listening, one of the things I have in my book, when you have a patient that's coming to the hospital with suicide, You treat that stage 4 suicide, like stage 4 cancer, you treat that shit aggressively. You don't do any half measures, no half doses. You treat it effectively. Whatever I'm not gonna tell you what to prescribe, not my training. What I can tell you is that the research shows is that if you don't get a therapeutic level, blood level of the drug in the quickest but safest way possible, the way the patient will see it is that, okay, I had this magical option of a medication that can help me, and it didn't help. So not only did you not help, you made it worse. Because now they think, I definitely have no help. There's no hope. I'm going to kill myself. So if you have the ability, treat it aggressively. You might worry about, oh, what about addiction to, sedatives or whatever? Secondary.
Yeah.
Keep them alive. Then we deal with that later.
Yeah.
Getting off my soapbox on that one.
You have a lot of good stuff. The lethality assessment, desire, intent, and capability. We all learn how important a plan is. We all learn how important access is, methods, means, all of these different things. I also, access to information is becoming more and more important now. Can I learn other ways to hurt myself? Can I learn other ways to... I had one girl who, I want to say she broke a light bulb and was cutting herself with the broken pieces of the light bulb. You said what?
That's creative.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, there's that. Yeah,
I mean, someone's told me a joke like, listen, you give a hippie enough shit and they'll make a bong out of it. You give someone the opportunity who wants to kill themselves, they'll find a way to kill themselves. And so, so someone might actually do that. And there's tons of ways that someone could do it. That, it doesn't necessarily need to be cutting themselves. They could hang themselves. They could stab themselves. Tons of different ways. The point that you want to do is you want to find out, okay, first off, have you thought about killing yourself? Okay, you have. Cool. Now, what ways have you thought? What is your plan? Okay, so you thought of shooting yourself. Okay, let's get rid of your access to guns. Yeah, they could still, get a light bulb and cut themselves, but that wasn't their plan. Now, going to the measures, in the techniques of, how to deal with it, one of the major things that you want to find out, I call this implicit insight, is you want to ask, what other ways have you thought of killing yourself? Because you got the original. What other ways, though? And they might say, no other ways. Cool, no problem. Now we're going to go into what I call detailed denial. In this, we're just going to ask a battery of questions, very specific. Okay, have you thought of shooting yourself? Have you, in the head? Have you thought of shooting yourself in the stomach? Have you thought of cutting yourself in the wrist? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you thought of this? All the options. And you want them to deny each one. Because they might not have thought about it. And it's not putting the thought in their head. But when they get home, like, well, he maybe put my gun away.
Yeah.
But it's a light bulb.
Yeah. So
that's why you want to do that, to get everything you can to try to reduce means as much as possible.
Yeah. There's a lot. I don't want to go through your whole book because I want people to actually read it and, partake in it. But I do want to talk about kind of the last couple of things. I do want to ask you about one of the things I think is really important, and it's delicate, but you have to do it, when you said, when it comes to suicide, don't pussyfoot around it.
Yep.
Because people are like, well, have you thought about potentially, maybe, possibly considering that you could want to maybe sort of, hurt yourself? I
know. No.
You said that. Why do you think that is so important?
I think it's important because if by not speaking directly and frankly about it, you're showing you're scared. And if you're scared, they're scared. This is not the time to pussyfoot around. Sometimes people actually think that I'm being hyperbolic about this. I'm not. We're dealing with life and death here. I don't care if they could be low lethality. I don't give a fuck. We're talking life and death. And so you don't pussyfoot around that. You don't play that game. When you hear suicide, you should be the TSA that just heard bomb. That's how you should be handling that.
I know you had mentioned that the layout and the illustrations were really important to you. Talk a little bit about why you made it an ebook, why you did it the way you did it, why you laid it out, why you illustrated it the way you did
100%.
Why you illustrated it.
Sure. So, that's a bunch of different questions. So I'll go to one at a time.
Yeah.
So I didn't want the book to just be paragraphs and words upon words because that's
Mm.
kind of boring, to be quite honest. And as someone who has ADHD, I don't like boring. I hate boring, and I'm not going to read it.
Mm.
So if I'm not going to read it, I'm going to assume you're not going to read it. I don't care if you have ADHD or not. I'm going to assume you're not going to read it. So I have to
Right.
make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more easier to consume. So
Hmm.
I knew that I wanted the layout to be something that was a bit more eye grabbing.
Yeah.
So um, I have a social media person who helps me. She helps me with a post every week. She helped me to create this. This was months in the making. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of content that took months. The remainder of the time was just making it look good.
Yeah. And it
The
does.
colors.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I don't know because it took a lot of time. It took a lot of criticism. It took a lot of uh, tweaking, a lot of changes. So the colors, the formatting of it, the
Hmm.
designs, the graphics. Do we want this? Do we want that? Oh, this looks good. And the next week, hey, what if we did this? Let's add this. Yeah, I didn't care. I can't believe we didn't think about that. It was a lot of different ideas. And so the person who made it, so my social media gal, so her name is Melissa McDermott. She
Hmm.
is phenomenal. I would recommend anybody who needs a social media manager, hit her up. She is phenomenal. And then the person who did the graphics that you'll find on various parts of the pages is she goes by Samantu. We're gonna
Come
call her Samantha. That's her full name, Samantha. She is a really, really great artist. Like
on.
we, so there were some sketches that we had, some initial stuff
Mm-hmm.
for each of the areas. At first, we had a wizard, just a random wizard being at one of the chapters covers, and then we changed it to something else. We changed it to the on the supplementary pages of the wizard. We
Hmm.
put that little tome with the smoke and the
Hmm.
gem and the leaves. So she created that. She created basically all of the chapter covers and a lot of the little graphics and designs that you see throughout the book. She did a phenomenal job. It looks beautiful, and I'm so so blessed to have had them on this team.
Nice. You put a lot of effort and energy into it. um, I will say that if you want help converting it to a paperback, we could talk because I've written a book maybe or two or a few.
Okay, I was unaware of this. Yes, please.
Yeah, we could chat. I helped what I wanted to do. One of the girls I work with, and she's not a client. She, I guess, we'll say mentor for lack of a better word. She just
Sure.
published. Well, I just helped her finish a book of poetry. Her first book. Her 16. All right, ready to feel bad about yourself. Her third book, two novels, and this is her first book of poetry, and it's her third book. 16.
Before I feel bad about myself, how old is she?
16.
Fuck me.
So she wrote a poem um, that she used to cut, and you'll figure that out. But
Mm-hmm.
working with her, and she lost her brother to cancer. So that age where everything pours out. She was telling me about it, and I was just like, "You're 16. You lost your grandmother already. You lost your brother, and you just so much loss, and you see the body issues and all these different things that go on in the book." But I want to read you this poem. It's called
Please.
"222 Days Since." It's now
Mm-hmm.
been 222 days since I last brought a blade to my broken body. Not a day goes by without thinking about it, the cold blade or the red waterfall that stops the crying. It's been 222 days, I think about it every day, and every day I wear a bikini. Every day I stare at a disgusting and imperfect body. From the cellulite waves to the scars that hide my deepest regrets and will be with me forever, just makes me want to do it more. But I can't, because then people will know that I'm not the happy, bubbly, dumb blonde that laughs at anything. But then people will know that I'm sick and I put on an act each and every of the last 222 days. That is one of the best poems I've read about an experience that encapsulates so many experiences.
That's powerful.
16.
My heart goes out to her.
I mean, I'll send you the episode that she was on when she's talking about the book, and
Yes, please.
she's just, like I said, third book. The second book she put out the day her brother died. We had an episode, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to do it?" She's like, "Yeah, let's just do it." And I was just like, "This was when she was 15."
Damn.
Yeah, and
Wow,
I'm just like,
that is a
"Yeah,
kind of resilience that is kind of rare.
yes, yes." And I think that your book will help us have more success stories like that, and I think it's super important. I mean, again, there's a lot going on in the book. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of tools. I think you're a wealth of knowledge,
Appreciate
and
that. Yeah.
it's
And again, I
good.
wanted to make it accessible. I want to make
Yeah.
it accessible. You know, it's not super long.
No.
I didn't want it to be super long
No.
because I want you to be able to find what you're looking for. I want to condense it
Yeah.
down. I didn't want to flower it up too much. It doesn't need to be 200 pages. Listen, could I have
No.
done that? Of course.
Yeah.
But I want to teach or give over what is needed to intervene right away.
Yes, and like I said, I used just I did a little bit of a plan of action with the girl I was telling you about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good because she was saying that she didn't want to tell her mom, and I said, "Listen, I'm going to trust you. I have no reason not to trust you. I'm going to call you tonight. I'm going to text you tonight. I'm going to call you tomorrow morning. You need to text me, you text me. You need to call me, you call me." And that access, people don't understand how important that is. And people are like, "Oh, well, blah, blah, blah." That's why I don't have a portal line or stuff like that I go to. I have a cell phone where you can text
Yep,
me, you can text me and talk to me. So many people have been like,
100%.
"Oh, you're you? You, I thought I would speak to somebody to make an appointment." No,
No.
no, I don't like that aspect that I can't make the first appointment. Am
Nah,
I?
this is all me. Yeah.
Yeah. And it has to be you. And I tell people, and I was just telling her, and luckily she didn't hurt. And I checked on her yesterday, and it's been about a week and a half. And I was just like, "Okay, how you doing?" She said, "Still good so far." Honesty, because
It's
she didn't have to tell me she
mm,
was feeling like cutting.
yes.
She didn't have to tell me.
Right.
And she said,
Exactly.
"Don't tell mom." I said, "We put in a plan." Okay. If if you feel like you're gonna cut, you're gonna tell your mom. You said, and you text me and let me know.
Bingo.
And for her, and again, I'm bringing the story up because it shows that so many people that are suicidal are looking for a connection, a human connection. So to just give a
Yes.
shit about them for 5 minutes.
Yes. They need that connection. And that's why I tell people, oh, how I know they're not, just being attention seeking. I don't care that they are. Maybe they're connection seeking.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Who doesn't do something that's a human being for attention one time in their life? But
Exactly.
you're talking about
Exactly. And they
people
need
that are
that
hurt.
connection. Yes. And they need that person that they can trust. And and again, I think it's totally fine to, again, kind of make that deal. Listen, I'm not going to hospitalize you. At the
Right.
same time, I'm expecting that should shit go down, you'll reach out to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's important, like you were saying. We have to give
It,
people a latitude to be human.
it's not just, it's not just good to have, it's necessary.
Yeah.
It needs to be there.
Yeah.
Because, in my opinion, without it, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Um. So again, the link is in the chat. The link to buy the book is in the chat. If anybody wants to reach out to me, they can reach out to me. If anybody wants Mark's information, his Alchemy Counseling NewYork.com is also in the chat. Again, we don't often get a lot of chance. We get an expert in something, and I'm not saying that as a play on the name, because suicidality, it's so touch and go. You're dealing with people, and a lot of times it's the fragilest of the fragile. It's the youngest. It's the people who've been beat down their whole life, and they're looking for a reason. They're kind of looking for you to say, "Give me a reason to live,"
Yep.
as
Yeah.
opposed to telling them why not to die. And it's it's such a thing. So,
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes it's as simple as there's no one else who's going to feed my goldfish. Like, it sounds silly, it sounds stupid, but
yeah.
that actually happened. That's an actual thing someone's told me. I swear to God. And they just need something. No one, again, if there's one takeaway from this, no
Oh,
one
good.
wants to die.
No. Um, Anything else you want to touch on about the book? Again, I think it's going to be amazing. We're going to chat about making it a paperback for you and making
Yeah,
you
please.
some quarters, some coins, because I think that's important too. Maybe taking some of the things. I think you can spin it and make it for people, not necessarily an intervention, but just more like a guide. Because I wrote a book on autism, and it's just called "Understand
Mm,
Autism." And
sure.
why I did it is people don't understand. You know,
Yeah. I could definitely spin it to the more general populace. I'm actually,
yeah.
I already have my next book planned for the general, actually the general populace, not just to clinicians.
Oh,
This one is going to be on contentment, what it is, how to
ooh.
achieve it, how to maintain it.
Mm. I like to be contempt at people too. I know you said contentment. I was just joking, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
In
Anything else
regards to
you
the
want
book,
to?
yeah, in regards to it, the link is in the chat. Check it out. It's not, I made sure to keep the price low. It's an ebook. You can download it. It's yours forever. You don't have to worry about, spilling your coffee on it and ruining it. It's there. It's in the cloud. So you'll always have access to it. Um, and yeah, I hope that you use it. I hope that you find a lot of good techniques, tips, tricks in it. And if you do, send me an email, markdavismhc@gmail.com. Send me an email. Let me know that you liked it.
I
Just give
love
me
it.
some feedback.
We're gonna get Mark on the. We're gonna get Mark for a second show. Thank you for being in the author spotlight. I appreciate you contributing and sharing your work with me. I know it's for clinicians, but I think everybody needs to learn a little bit more
Sure.
because even working, like you said, sometimes parents, other professionals, other people
Yes.
can be an impediment to helping somebody because oh, they always make the suicidal statement. Oh, they just want attention. Oh, until you get the one time when they're not just bullshitting and they actually try.
Exactly. Right on
And
the
then
money. Exactly.
and then you feel bad.
Right. So take them all. Take every single one seriously. It could be the last. And do you
Mm-hmm.
really want to take that risk?
So I'm going to sum it up with what you said at the end of your intro. The number of lives, your wisdom, and how you can save somebody can never be overstated. I paraphrased it, but I do think that with the proper tools that you can save one life. And like you said, it only takes one. And, I refer back to the episode of House where he said, the numbers aren't in my favor. And House, you don't like that. Like Mr. Davis said, one person at a time, one starfish at a time.
Exactly. One at a time. And that's what we're doing. I want you to be able to help people, they can intervene one more at a time and make that dent in this terrible mental health epidemic that we have.
All right, Mr. Davis, we're going to call that a night. I'm going to let you go, hang out in the back. I'm going to kick you out, and we will talk soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me, Achille. I love it. I can't
No
wait to be back.
We are going to be here on Saturday at 8 p.m. for Joker LMXC Presents. Me and Mark are going to be talking about self-harm and suicidality more in depth. This was kind of like a prelude to that, and we're going to have some fun. So, other than that, Joker